The sidewalk still remembers. Even after all these years, it hums beneath your shoes like a wire still carrying current. You're in Birmingham, Alabama, 1958, and nothing's quiet here, not really. The cicadas scream like protest. The air sticks to your ribs like it's trying to make you slow down. Every building seems to lean in, listening, but pretending it isn't. You pass a church with peeling paint, a corner store with sun-faded signs, a bus stop where folks sit close, not because they want to, but because there's nowhere else they're allowed to. Then you see it. The sidewalk. At the intersection of 9th and River. Plain. Cracked. Unmarked. But if you pause, just long enough, you'll feel the hum. Right there in the concrete. Because something happened here. Something heavy enough to settle in the bones of the block. It was a Tuesday morning. Too early for anything loud. And that's what made it worse. She was just walking. Ruth Williams. 6 months pregnant. Grocery bag in one arm. Hand on her belly. Sun had tilted just enough to keep the sweat off her brow. She wasn't rushing. Wasn't smiling. Wasn't bothering anyone. Just carrying life. The cop's name was Officer Keller. White. 45. Always chewed gum too loud. Always lingered too long outside the corner store. People didn't look him in the eye. They looked around him. That morning, he saw Ruth cross the street. The light was yellow. She stepped off the curb. The moment she did, he barked something you couldn't quite hear. She froze. He didn't. 1 step. 2. Then his boot, black, polished, rose and landed right below her ribs. You hear it in your bones. The thud. The gasp. The sound of groceries hitting pavement. The sound of her hitting pavement. People stopped. But no one moved. Not yet. Because in Birmingham, 1958, fear was thick enough to chew. Ruth cried out, not for help, but in pain. A sound that didn't ask permission. And the worst part? He didn't even yell. Officer Keller just straightened his collar, flicked a speck off his shoulder, and walked back to his patrol car like he'd swatted a stray dog. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Because he thought no one would remember. But someone did. There's a window just above the corner store, 3rd floor, east side. Paint peeling from the sill, curtain tied with a shoelace. It doesn't look like much. But someone was watching. His name's Micah, 12 years old. Glasses too thick for his face. Hands always fidgeting. A quiet boy in a loud world. The kind who notices everything, especially when he's not supposed to. He should have been at school, but the flu kept him home. And that morning, he was sitting on the radiator with his camera, his father's old box-style Kodak, passed down like a blessing and a secret. Micah had been practicing light angles, taking photos of the sun bouncing off the bricks across the street. That's when he saw her. Ruth. Walking slow, careful. And then he saw him. The officer. Micah didn't know what was about to happen, but his finger was already on the shutter. So when the boot rose, click. And when Ruth crumpled, click. And when the man turned and walked away, click. 3 frames. Each one clear. Each one undeniable. Micah didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just sat there, camera in his lap, legs swinging. He'd never seen someone hit a pregnant woman before. He thought about his mom, how she used to wrap him up like bread dough when the world got too cold. How she always told him, our silence is not their safety. Micah didn't know exactly what she meant then. But now? Now he did. Across the street, Ruth was still on the ground. Groceries split open. Eggs leaking into the gutter. Her hand gripping her stomach like she was trying to hold the world together with one palm. A woman finally rushed out from the bakery. Another came from the church steps. Together they lifted Ruth as gently as they could. She didn't speak. Her mouth moved. But no sound came. Micah raised the camera again. But stopped. Some things don't belong in pictures. Some things are sacred. Like the moment a woman breaks, but refuses to shatter. Later, the police report would say she slipped. That she fell. That there were no witnesses. And Officer Keller would finish his shift, stop by the diner, and order pie like it was any other day. Because he thought he'd gotten away with it. But what he didn't know is that truth had teeth. And Micah? He just loaded a fresh roll of film. Micah didn't tell his mother. Not that day. He waited until nightfall when the house was quiet, and the only sound was the creak of wood settling into itself. His camera sat on his desk like it was holding its breath. He opened the back carefully, removed the roll like it was glass. Then, with hands that shook just enough to make the scissors stutter, he cut and coiled the film into a tin canister. Just like his father taught him before he passed. Down in the basement, under one bare bulb and a red makeshift filter, Micah stepped into the dark room his father built. It smelled like vinegar and something sharper, truth in liquid form. He knew the steps by heart. Developer. Stop bath. Fixer. The photo came alive slowly. And when it did, Micah forgot to breathe. There she was, a Ruth. Mid-fall. One hand reaching out, one knee buckling. Her mouth slightly open. Her eyes stunned. And behind her? Officer Keller. Boot extended. Face turned just enough to see the smirk that didn't make it into the police report. Micah developed all three. Mounted them to dry. Stared at them for what felt like an hour. And he knew these pictures were dangerous. He remembered his father's words, low and careful, once whispered into his ear like scripture. Sometimes the camera is louder than a riot. The next morning, Micah rolled the prints into a cardboard tube, sealed it with tape, and biked across town. To the one place he thought someone might listen. The Birmingham Standard. A black-owned newspaper with cracked windows, an editor who smoked too much, and a front desk with a bell that hadn't rung in years. Micah stood on his toes, rang it. Out came Mr. Alden. Tired eyes. Graying mustache. Hands stained with ink and long nights. Micah held out the tube. Someone needs to see this, he said. Alden didn't ask questions, not yet. He took the tube, opened it, and the moment he unrolled the first photo, he stopped chewing his cigar. 10 minutes later, the prints were pinned to the corkboard in the back room. Nobody spoke, because the images spoke for themselves. Alden finally muttered, "Lord help us all." He didn't mean that in fear. He meant it in reverence, because he knew this wasn't just evidence. It was proof. And proof, in a town like this, could either build a bridge or burn everything to the ground. The next day, the paper didn't run the photo. Not yet. Inside the Birmingham Standard, the editor paced. He held Micah's images like they were lit matches, knowing exactly what they could ignite: truth, fury, maybe both. Outside, the city moved like nothing had happened. Bread still baked. Suits still pressed. Patrolmen still tipped their hats to the right faces. But under it all, something was vibrating. Unseen. Unnamed. A photograph doesn't ask for permission, but it demands a response. Across town, Ruth lay in a hospital bed. Fluorescent lights buzzed above her. The room smelled like bleach and quiet prayers. She hadn't lost the baby, but the doctors said it could have gone the other way. One more kick. One less second of timing. The bruises across her ribs were already darkening, pale purple halos that said everything without words. She hadn't spoken much. Didn't want to press charges. Didn't trust it would matter. You sit beside her now. She turns her head toward the window. I was just walking, she says. As if that needed explanation. Her voice is calm, but the kind of calm that comes after too many slammed doors. You learn things in that room. Like how she once marched with her older sister in Montgomery, barefoot, holding hands with strangers who became family just by not letting go. How her husband died in Korea, 2 months before she knew she was carrying life inside her. How she planned to name the baby Grace, not because it was pretty, but because it was earned. When you ask what she remembers from the sidewalk, she hesitates. Then says, "The silence. Not from me. From everyone watching." She doesn't blame them. Not fully. She just knows what it feels like to scream inside a city that won't echo you back. Later that week, Alden returns to her room. He's holding the photo. He doesn't show it right away. He just says, "A boy took this. From his window. He saw you." Ruth doesn't flinch, but she sits up. Alden unrolls the image. Holds it out. She studies it quietly. Her body. Mid-collapse. Groceries in the air. His boot clear. Unmistakable. The cop's face turned, jaw tight. She blinks slowly. "That's me," she whispers. Not with shame. With ownership. Then, "Print it." Alden nods. But not fast. Because he knows what that means. You understand once it's out there. She finishes the sentence for him. He can't lie anymore. That Sunday, the paper hits the streets. Not the front page. Page 3. Middle column. But it spreads. Barbershops. Churches. Kitchen tables. Whispers turn into questions. Questions into phone calls. And Officer Keller? He sees the photo for the first time taped to a telephone pole. Right under the word, "Witnessed." He tears it down. But it's too late. Because photos don't disappear. Not once truth learns to walk on its own legs. Officer Keller walks into the precinct Monday morning like nothing's changed. But it has. You can see it in the way his fellow officers glance sideways. In the pause before someone answers his question. In how the coffee pot sits untouched when he enters the break room. He tries to joke. Something about the weather, about damn busybodies with cameras. No one laughs. Because they all saw it. The photo. That moment. Frozen. Undeniable. A pregnant black woman on the ground, his boots still in motion. The press didn't change the lighting, didn't edit the angle. It didn't need to. The truth was in the frame. He stomps into the superior's office, throws the paper down. What the hell is this? The captain looks at him, longer than usual. Then says, "What you did?" Silence. Keller barks, "She fell." But the captain leans back, folds his arms, and just says, "So did your story." That afternoon, Internal Affairs opens an inquiry. Unofficially. Quietly. But the city's already louder than they expected. By midweek, flyers plaster storefronts. Ruth's face, cut from the photo on one side. The words, "We saw," in bold beneath it. A church holds a prayer vigil. Not for peace. For clarity. A march is planned. But Ruth doesn't attend. She's home, wrapped in a blanket, watching from the window. Her baby kicks for the first time that day. She smiles, but her eyes don't soften. Because she knows, kicks can carry power or pain. Sometimes both. Back at the paper, Alden receives an anonymous envelope. Inside, a second photo. Micah again, taken a split second after the others. In this one, Keller's face is turned more clearly. Eyes narrowed. Jaw clenched. Boot already down. You don't need a caption. The story's already speaking. And people are listening. The mayor can't ignore it anymore. He releases a statement. Vague. Legal. We are deeply troubled. A full review is underway. But you can hear it, the crack in the tone. The kind of tremor that comes when power realizes it's not the loudest thing in the room anymore. At school, Micah is pulled aside by the principal. He's not in trouble. Instead, the man clears his throat and says, "You took that picture, didn't you?" Micah doesn't lie. He just nods. Then the principal, awkward, careful, says, "My wife cried when she saw it. Said she hadn't seen a truth like that since Selma." Micah swallows hard. Then he asks, "Will he go to jail?" The principal sighs. "I don't know." Micah doesn't press. But that night, he develops more photos. Not of violence. Of Ruth. Recovering. Reading. Laughing faintly with her sister. Holding her belly like she's guarding the last candle in a storm. And these? These don't belong in newspapers. They belong on walls. Because while the world watched a woman get knocked down now, Micah's camera? It never stopped seeing the woman who stood back up. The church is packed. Not for Sunday service. For something quieter. Heavier. They call it a gathering. But you feel the pulse of something deeper. Not protest. Not yet. Just a long inhale before the truth speaks out loud. The room smells like wax and old wood. Pews creak under the weight of tension and folded hands. Children sit silently. Grandmothers press handkerchiefs to their lips. And in the front row, Ruth sits, belly rounded, spine straight, eyes forward. Not trembling. Just tired of being polite about pain. Behind her, rows of faces. Behind them, the press. Not all of them friendly, but all of them present. At the pulpit, Reverend Carlin adjusts his glasses and begins to read, not scripture, but statements, affidavits, eyewitness letters. And, finally, he holds up the photo. The one. He doesn't wave it. He lifts it, like it's heavier than paper. The Lord said, "What is whispered in the dark shall be shouted from rooftops." Well, today, the rooftop is here. Applause doesn't break out. But breath does. The kind people hold when they've been waiting to be believed. Outside, a small crowd gathers around speakers wired to the church's windows. You see Micah there, standing beside his mother. She doesn't hold his hand anymore. She holds his shoulder. She's taller than him now, but not for long. The Reverend continues, reading from the city's policy manual, then from the newspaper, then from Ruth's own written testimony. And then he stops. Not for effect. For space. Because the next speaker is Ruth. You watch her rise. Carefully. The hush is immediate. She walks to the pulpit in flat shoes and a pale green dress. Her hand never leaves the curve of her stomach. She looks out over the crowd and says, simply, "I was walking home." It's not a speech. It's a statement of fact. I was carrying milk, eggs, a box of soap. I was tired. I stepped into the crosswalk. She pauses. He didn't speak. Not really. He just reacted. Her eyes drift toward the photo, then back to the crowd. I didn't know someone was watching. I didn't know someone cared enough to hold a camera steady when their hands were probably shaking. She turns slightly toward Micah. Doesn't point. Just nods. Then she says, I've carried a child. Now I carry a truth. Silence stretches again, but this time it comforts. Because what do you say to a woman who got kicked to the ground and stood up taller than the courthouse? Nothing. You listen. Afterward, no one rushes the stage. No one floods the aisle. They just sit, soaking in the sound of something they've never heard this loud. Dignity. Micah takes a photo, not of Ruth this time, of the whole room. Shoulders leaned in, hands on knees, heads bowed not in prayer, but in promise. He'll develop it later and name it after the storm. Because he knows now. Storms don't always roar. Sometimes they whisper, and then leave behind people who finally start to speak. The courthouse doesn't look any different. Same pillars, same chipped steps, same echo when the heavy wooden doors swing shut behind you. But today, the weight inside feels different. You're seated in the back row. The benches are hard. The air smells like old paper and old power. On the far wall, the flag hangs limp, silent, like it's not sure which side of the story it's on. Ruth sits on the witness bench, her belly round, hands folded calmly over the rise of her dress. Micah sits a few rows behind her, spine straight, a manila envelope in his lap. His mother's hand rests on his back, like she's holding up a pillar. Officer Keller is there, too. Not in uniform. Just a pale gray suit that doesn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. He sits with his lawyer, jaw tight, fingers tapping the table like he's waiting for a punch that hasn't landed yet. But it's coming. Because today, the courtroom will listen. The judge is older, white, with eyes that flicker but never blink. You can't read him, not yet. But you can tell he's watching. The first hour is procedural. The second is testimony. But it's the third hour when the air changes. Ruth takes the stand. She swears in, sits, adjusts the microphone. Then, with a voice as steady as a hymn, she tells them everything. I crossed the street at the light. I didn't resist. I didn't speak. I didn't expect kindness. But I didn't expect violence, either. She pauses, then leans forward. And I didn't fall. Silence. The judge shifts. I was kicked. Keller flinches, barely. But everyone sees it. When they ask her how she knew he meant to harm her, she doesn't blink. He looked at me like I wasn't real. You don't forget that kind of gaze. The lawyer tries to rattle her. Asks about timing, about lighting, about interpretation. Ruth doesn't move. My ribs bruised, she says. My child didn't kick for 2 days. You don't have to interpret pain. Then it's Micah's turn. The judge allows it. A 12-year-old boy. He walks to the front like his shoes are 2 sizes too big. He carries the envelope. Hands it to the bailiff. The bailiff passes it to the clerk. 3 photographs are entered into evidence. The judge studies them for a long time. Then he looks at Micah. Did anyone tell you what to say today? Micah shakes his head. Why did you take the picture? Micah's voice is small, but sure. Because someone had to. That sentence lands heavier than any gavel. Because in this courtroom, built on silence and white lies, a boy with thick glasses just delivered clarity. After the testimony ends, no one stands. Not yet. They're waiting. For something to break. For something to breathe. The judge finally speaks. This court will recess. A verdict will be delivered tomorrow morning. The room exhales all at once. But no one speaks. Because this isn't over. Not yet. Outside, the sidewalk is crowded. Not with protesters. With people who finally know what they saw. Ruth steps into the light. The same street where it all happened. And now, it's hers. The next morning, the courtroom fills before sunrise. There's no shouting. No banners. Just rows and rows of quiet faces. Teachers, janitors, store clerks, old men in Sunday suits, young mothers holding toddlers. Everyone breathes the same air like they're sharing one collective lung. The judge enters, slow and expressionless. You feel your heartbeat in your hands. The verdict is already typed, but the weight of it is still traveling from the paper to the room. He begins to speak. This court has reviewed the testimony, the photographs, and the city's record of conduct. He pauses, not for drama, for truth to catch up, and finds the defendant, Officer Henry Keller, guilty of assault with intent to harm. No gasps, just a sound you didn't expect. Weeping, not from Ruth, from someone behind you. A woman clutching a purse too tight. Maybe she saw the photo. Maybe she knew the silence too well. You look at Ruth. She doesn't cry. She doesn't move. She just closes her eyes and rests. As if, for the first time in years, the world tilted in the right direction. The judge continues, issuing the sentence. 3 years. No parole. Removal from the force. Permanent record. Officer Keller doesn't react, but his jaw unclenches. His face doesn't register rage or regret, just defeat. Because for the first time, his word wasn't stronger than witness. And it never will be again. Micah sits still, his glasses fogged. He doesn't smile. He knows. Justice is not a parade. It's a breath you finally let go after holding it too long. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarm. But Ruth doesn't stop for them. She steps carefully down the stairs, her hand on her belly. Micah walks beside her. He doesn't ask anything, but she leans down and whispers, "Thank you for seeing me." He nods, then reaches into his bag and pulls out one last photo. This one isn't of the kick, not of the courtroom. It's of her, standing, upright, bathed in window light. Back straight, eyes strong, hand resting where life begins. He gives it to her. She studies it quietly, and for the first time since it all began, she smiles. Because this image, it doesn't tell a story of violence. It tells the story of what came after, of who stood up, of who watched, and of the boy who taught a city that cameras aren't for catching criminals. They're for catching truth. Time doesn't leap forward, it leans. A week passes, then a month. And though the courtroom is empty now, the echo of Ruth's testimony still clings to its walls like old dust and gospel songs. But the photo? It doesn't stay quiet. Micah's 3 frames make their way into more than just the Birmingham Standard. A Chicago paper runs it with the headline, "Kicked, Pregnant, Still Standing." A northern magazine reprints it under, "The Power of Witness." And soon, it's no longer just a photo. It's evidence in conversations far beyond Alabama. Sermons are preached with it projected behind pulpits. Teachers pin it to classroom corkboards beside handwritten questions in chalk. What did you see? What would you do? Micah doesn't become famous, but he becomes visible. A scholarship letter arrives in the mail from a photography school up north. He folds it quietly, tucks it into a box labeled later. Right now, he's focused on something else, on capturing hope. He visits Ruth often, not to take photos, but to listen. They sit in her living room, now bright with sunlight and humming softly with the rhythm of healing. There are baby clothes folded neatly on the table, a name stitched into a onesie, Grace. Ruth is slower these days, her movements softer, but her words? Sharper. "I used to walk through this town small," she says one evening, rocking gently. Not afraid, just folded up. She glances toward the window. "But now, when I move, I stretch." You see it in how the neighbors speak to her now, not in pity, but with weight. Like every word exchanged with her matters more. Like they're finally learning to hold a woman's story without pressing it down. And across town, something shifts in the police department, too. Keller's conviction lights a fuse. A new review board is formed. Old complaints are reopened. A sergeant is demoted. Another quietly retires. Change doesn't come fast, but it arrives. Micah captures it all, not with speeches, but with stillness. A photo of Ruth and her sister laughing on the porch. A shot of a child placing flowers at the courthouse steps. One of a police cruiser rolling slowly past Bell Square. Windows open, music low, no fear. He hangs them in a gallery at the local library. Calls the collection, "After the Flash." And beneath each frame, he adds a caption. But not dates, not headlines, just questions. Like, would you have turned away? What would you have carried? When did you stop looking? Because Micah knows now. Pictures don't end stories. They provoke them. The gallery stays open longer than planned. People come in pairs, in silence. Some don't speak at all. Others speak in whispers, like the walls are listening. Kids press their fingers to the glass, tracing outlines of light and shadow. Elders sit on benches, eyes glassy, heads nodding to rhythms only they can hear. Everyone who walks in leaves a little heavier, or maybe a little more awake. And in the back corner, always, the photo. That photo. Ruth falling. The boot mid-swing. The moment that broke the town open. But beside it now hangs something new. A second frame. Ruth, standing on the courthouse steps, one hand on her belly, the other raised ever so slightly like she's anchoring herself to truth. Taken by Micah. Same woman, different power. And the caption underneath? From witness to worth. One afternoon, Ruth walks in. Grace is with her now. Chubby cheeks, ribbon in her hair, already trying to outrun her own feet. She tugs at her mother's hand, points to the second photo. "Is that you, Mama?" Ruth kneels. "Yes, baby." Grace tilts her head. You look like you're about to fly. Ruth laughs. Soft, full. Well, she says, maybe I was. They stay for a while, walking slowly between frames. Ruth doesn't linger on the fall. She doesn't need to. She remembers. But she's already moved beyond it. Across the gallery, Micah watches. He doesn't interrupt. Doesn't photograph this moment. Some stories you hold in your chest, not your lens. Later, he walks Ruth to her car. Grace asleep in her arms now, small fists curled against her shoulder. I still don't know how you stood back up, he says. Ruth buckles Grace in, then closes the door and leans back. I didn't, she says. Micah frowns. She smiles. Y'all pulled me. She doesn't explain further. She doesn't have to. That night, Micah develops a final print. It's a wide shot of the gallery, empty, glowing, every image bathed in low golden light. He titles it, The Room Where We Learn to Listen. Because by now, he understands something Ruth taught him without ever trying. Justice doesn't end with a sentence. It begins with who's watching, and what they choose to do after. Spring creeps into Birmingham with a kind of hush. No trumpets, no big blooms. Just warmth edging into the wind, like the sky is finally exhaling. Sidewalks thaw. Windows crack open. Life, after so much holding still, starts to shift again. Ruth walks slower now, not from pain, but because she can. She doesn't have to avoid eyes anymore. They meet hers, and they don't flick away. At the grocery store, the clerk greets her by name. At the bus stop, strangers offer her a seat, not because she's carrying a child, Grace is 3 now, but because she carried a town through fire. You see it most in the way kids look at her, like someone from a fable, or a page in a book they haven't read yet, but already believe in. One morning, she receives a letter in the mail, handwritten, from Keller's wife. The envelope trembles in her hand. She opens it slowly. Inside, 4 short lines. I did not see the truth until it hit the page. I believed the man I married. And then I saw what he did. I am sorry. For what that's worth. Ruth reads it once. Twice. Then folds it. Not to save it. To finish it. That night, she burns the letter in her backyard. Watches the paper curl and blacken. Lets the wind carry the last ash down the block. Not to erase. To release. Micah hears about it days later. He asks her, gently, do you regret printing the photo? Ruth looks out the window, sees Grace tracing chalk letters on the porch step. She answers, do you regret opening your eyes? He doesn't. She didn't either. The town starts talking about adding her name to a street. Then a mural. Then a scholarship. Ruth declines most of it. If you want to honor me, she says, teach your daughters to walk anywhere. And your sons to see them when they do. So they do. A new art teacher paints a mural on the side of the school. Ruth with Grace on her hip, standing on that same sidewalk, head turned to the sun. It's titled, Still Rising. And beside it, painted in tiny letters. Photographed by Micah. Witnessed by us all. You pass it one evening as dusk settles in. The colors seem to hum. And for once, so does the town. 10 years later, you walk those same sidewalks again. They haven't changed much. Same cracks. Same creeks, same trees with roots that push through like they're trying to remind the city what it's built on. But the names have changed. There's a plaque now at the intersection of 9th and River. You stop and read. On this corner in 1958, a woman was knocked down. She stood back up, and a city finally looked itself in the eye. Below it, Ruth Williams Way. People still walk fast here. Still talk in short sentences and long silences. But when they pass that sign, they slow, just a little. Some take their hats off. Others pause, hand on chest, like they're checking to see if their heart still remembers. You visit Ruth's house. It's smaller than you recall, but warmer. Inside, she's sitting by the window, knitting a yellow sweater. Tiny, for a child who hasn't arrived yet. Grace is expecting now, and Ruth's going to be a grandmother. She laughs when you mention it. Can't believe I'm still here to see it. You can, because people like her don't just survive. They continue. She reaches for a box under the coffee table. Inside, photographs. Some faded, others sharp as the day they were born. Micah's work. She flips through slowly. Photos of the courtroom, the vigil, the first time Grace walked past the mural and said, that's us. And then she pulls out one more. A recent one. Micah took it last month. It's Ruth, holding Grace's hand on one side, and Grace's husband's hand on the other. Sunlight filters behind them like a blessing. They asked me to speak at the school next month, she says softly. To talk about history. Then she smiles. But I think I'll talk about seeing. Across town, Micah runs a small studio now. Not for profit. For memory. Kids bring their own cameras. Disposable, digital, cracked from dropping them too many times. He teaches them how to wait. How to notice. How to ask. What am I really looking at? Above his desk hangs only one frame. The photo. Still. Unchanged. Unforgiving. But beside it now another. Grace. Pregnant. Smiling. Standing in the same spot her mother once fell. And beneath it, a caption written in Micah's handwriting. We don't erase pain. We build over it. And let the light find its way in. You leave the studio as evening spreads across Birmingham, soft and golden. And for the first time in a long while, the sidewalk doesn't hum with pain. It hums with presence, with the sound of people still walking and still watching. The museum is quiet, not silent, but respectfully hushed, like every wall is holding its breath between stories. You step into the new exhibit. Through their eyes, moments that changed America. It's not flashy, just wood floors, soft lights, and time lined up in frames. Near the center, under a low amber spotlight, hangs the photograph. Ruth. Midfall. Groceries flying. Officer Keller's boot suspended, like the world itself was caught hesitating. There's no long caption. Just this. Photographed by Micah J., age 12. Birmingham, Alabama, 1958. Courtesy of the Williams family. You'd think people would walk past it quickly. But they don't. They stop. They linger. A teenager with headphones stares at it for nearly 5 minutes, then pulls one earbud out and whispers, "Damn." An older couple holds hands. The woman wipes her eye. The man mutters, "I remember." And behind you, a teacher asks a class, "What do you see?" A boy answers, "Someone got hurt." A girl follows, "Someone got caught." But another child, barely old enough to tie her shoes, says, "Somebody saw her." That one lands hardest. Because that's what changed everything, isn't it? Someone saw her. At the back of the room, there's a guest book. People write more than their names. You read, "She could have been my mother." I've been that sidewalk. Now I look closer. At everything. Ruth visits the exhibit once. She doesn't tell anyone. Just slips in with her cardigan buttoned wrong and a quiet step. She stands in front of the photo for a long time. Then she turns away, walks to the next one. The photo Micah took years later. Her standing, Grace beside her, sun streaking across the sidewalk where it all began. She smiles. Because this one? It's not about the fall. It's about what stood up after. Before she leaves, she signs the guest book. Just 2 words. Still rising. Micah never framed that page. He didn't need to. Because the whole exhibit is framed by it now. At the exit, there's a final display. A small, worn camera in a glass box. Micah's Kodak. The same one he held at 12. Beneath it, etched in brass. The boy who saw. The photo that spoke. The woman who kept walking. And as you step back out into the world, feet on sidewalk, wind in your ears, you carry more than you came in with. You carry her story. You carry what she made us see. Years pass. The world keeps changing. Louder, faster, more distracted. Headlines flash like lightning. Protests spark and fade. But Ruth's story, it lingers. Not in noise, but in the quiet choices people start to make. At the university downtown, her photo becomes required study in a journalism class. Not just as history, but as responsibility. Students write essays titled, "The Angle That Changed the Law." How one boy's camera told the truth. The woman who didn't scream, but was heard. Micah, now older, comes to guest lecture sometimes. He walks with a slight limp these days. Nothing tragic, just the slow wear of carrying stories. He always brings the same message. Take the photo, then decide what to do with it. But never look away. Ruth rarely leaves the house anymore. Not because she can't, because she doesn't need to. The world has come to her. Children visit with notebooks. Young mothers bring their daughters. Pastors ask for her blessing before sermons. Politicians ask her to pose, but she rarely does. Some things, she says, aren't for your campaign. They're for your conscience. Grace is grown now. Her daughter, Ruth's granddaughter, is named Eliza. And at age 9, she wins a school essay contest with a piece titled, "The Day My Grandma Didn't Fall." Ruth cries when she reads it. Not because it hurts. Because someone rewrote the headline. The sidewalk outside her old home is now engraved. Just 4 words. We still see her. Visitors trace the letters with their fingers like braille, like scripture. School groups stand in a circle around it every February. Some sing, some just breathe. And one winter afternoon, Ruth asks to go for a walk. Grace takes her hand. They walk slowly. No rush. Snowflakes catch in their hair like stars that got too close. They pass the mural, the school, the intersection, and when they reach the museum, Ruth stops. A tour is going on inside. A guide speaks. This was the photo that changed everything. It wasn't violent. It wasn't loud. It just showed what was real. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing of all. Ruth smiles faintly, then turns to Grace and says, "I'm ready." Ready for what? Grace asks. Ruth looks toward the horizon. To rest. And for once, the sidewalk doesn't remember pain. It remembers peace. The funeral is small. Not because she wasn't loved. Because Ruth asked for it that way. No limousines, she said. No politicians. Just people who listened. So they come. Quietly. In Sunday coats and soft shoes. The church hums with slow organ notes and the whisper of memories being passed from lap to lap. Micah sits in the third pew, holding his camera in his hands, but not to use. Just to hold. Like a relic. Grace sits in the front row, with Eliza beside her. The little girl wears a blue ribbon in her hair, the same color Ruth wore the day she stood in court and said, "I didn't fall. I was kicked." Eliza doesn't cry. She clutches a folded paper in her hand. When the pastor finishes, he asks if anyone would like to speak. Eliza stands, walks to the front with the careful determination of a girl raised in the shadow of a woman who never begged for the sun, but earned it anyway. She unfolds the paper, reads clearly. "My grandmother didn't change the world by yelling. She didn't have to. She changed it by being seen, by standing up, by walking on bruised legs and telling the truth anyway. They tried to knock her down. She stood up taller. And because she stood, we see farther now. No applause, just stillness and wet cheeks." Micah, later, prints that speech, puts it beside the photo in the museum. A final caption beneath both reads, "Legacy is not what you leave behind. It's who keeps walking because you once stood." Back at the graveyard, Ruth is laid beside her husband, under a tree that leans toward the east like it's bowing. On her headstone, Ruth Williams, 1931 to 2023, still rising. Micah stays after everyone's gone, places his old Kodak on the headstone, gently, not as a goodbye, as a thank you. He whispers, "You showed me how to see," then turns and walks down the gravel path, light slanting across his back, shadows long and soft. At home that night, Eliza asks her mother if she can sleep with the lights off. "I'm not scared anymore," she says. And Grace answers, "Good. Because we come from women who walked through dark just fine." The house falls quiet. And somewhere far away, on a street corner cracked with time, on a sidewalk that once held too much silence, the wind moves gently over the words carved into stone. We still see her. And we do. We always will.